Our son, Ben, was born in June of 1980. And I think anyone who's had a child knows that that's when you figure out that, A, you are now grown up, and B, there is such a thing as mortality. Suddenly it's not the future anymore. This is life now. And so these entrepreneurial, when you sever your ties to a paycheck, when you've got a wife and a 3-month-old kid sitting upstairs and a mortgage and all those kinds of things, it's going to, you've got to make it work. I am the most stubborn person you will ever meet. I really believe in the idea that if you want to learn to swim, you can take lessons. You can read about it on a shore. You can stick your feet in the water. But what you need to do is go out to the deep end of the dock and jump in and swim.
Phil Bredesen was the first kid in his New York town to jump from high school to the Ivy League. The deep end.
Almost on a whim, applied to Harvard, got in. I mean, I studied physics.
An Austrian philosopher once called physics experience arranged in economical order. The same might be said about the entrepreneur turned mayor turned governor, Phil Bredesen.
I love solving problems. I mean, it's why I got involved in physics, I guess, and mathematics and so on in the first place. And when you solve problems, that separating the signal from the noise is what it's all about. Okay, what really is the question you need to be asking here? What do you need to figure out about this? And what are the steps you can take to get from here to there?
From the Chase Studio at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, you're listening to Circle Back. This is the show where Nashville's most dynamic entrepreneurs share their stories of startup success and stumbles. I'm your host, Clark Buckner. This episode is brought to you by financial planning and investment advisor Haas Goodwin Wealth. Support also comes from the digital asset fund UTXO Management. Circle Back is a production of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. Here's our CEO, Jane Allen, to share more.
Hi, I'm Jane Allen, CEO of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. We are thrilled to bring this new podcast series to share stories of some of the amazing entrepreneurs who helped build this city, Nashville, a city that has entrepreneurship in its tapestry. It is what helps make Nashville such a fabulous place to live, work, start, and grow a business. We believe it is so important that we connect the entrepreneurial and the business community, that the EC partners with our local business community to bring innovation and innovative solutions to the forefront. We hope that as you listen, you feel inspired, entertained, and learn something new as we circle back to the early days with some of Nashville's most successful entrepreneurs as they discuss how they brought innovative solutions to life. The EC was started as successful business people and entrepreneurs wanted to give their time and money to help the next generation. And we have been doing this for more than 10 years. We work each and every day to connect entrepreneurs in every facet of the life cycle to the resources they need. And we are thrilled to have these, what we call Phase 4 entrepreneurs, share their story to help and inspire others. Thank you for listening.
My family broke up when I was 7. My father found a woman he liked better, and he was worked in the business world. My mother was just a high school graduate who worked as a teller in the local bank all her life. In fact, when I think back to my childhood, I can't think of anyone else that I knew who was in a single parent home. We lived with my grandmother in this little town, Shortsville. Population about 1,100. I think it's grown to 1,200 now over the last 50 years. And I'd say kind of a combination of I really loved school and did well in school. And I was also a very outdoorsy guy. I mean, what I liked to do in the afternoon was go fishing and go walking in the woods and those kinds of things. It was a house with a lot of structure in that way, and I think that was really good for me, particularly when your life is disrupted in the way when your family breaks up and you move back home. I was always doing entrepreneurial things. I mean, the first one was I sold Cloverine brand salve, which was 35 cents a tin, and you know, it was one of these deals where you got this tin of 15 tins, and you went door to door, and it was 35 cents, and you got a tin of salve and a print of a flower or something like that for it. I sold Christmas cards, I think, every year from the time I was 8 until I probably left high school, door to door in town, and also just thought a lot about starting something. At one point I wanted to start a hamburger stand, and I would go through these Sears catalogs, which at that time were more kind of farm oriented than they are today, and mark all the stuff that I would need for my hamburger stand. I've always enjoyed that kind of thing, and ultimately it became probably the thing I enjoyed most of all. Just starting something up and making something exist or happen where it wasn't there before.
Even at Harvard, Bredesen would get up early and deliver newspapers. And he eventually found his way over to the university's brand new computer.
At Mallinckrodt Hall, which was the chemistry building, they bought an IBM 1620 computer, which is, think about the size of a desk with a punch card reader on it and so on. When I finished my paper route, which was still before the classes started and everything, I went over to the computer and I turned it on and got the manual out and started figuring out what this thing was all about. So for probably the best part of a year during the winter, I'd spend an hour on that thing either before or after my paper route in the morning while nobody was in the building, until somebody finally found out about it and forbid me from coming in. The paper boy couldn't come in and use the computer anymore. But that's where I got interested in it, and then from then on went. But it was all self-taught, which I think would have been pretty standard in those days.
His computer savvy landed him a first job. It was with a tech company, and eventually he found himself in a management position overseas in London.
When I lived and worked in London, I had a relationship with a company called Bupa, which is a private insurance company in London. And one day when I was there for something, they asked me if I would drive a doctor back to the airport, back to Heathrow. And I said, sure, I'm glad to. And I took him, and his name was Sidney Garfield. He was one of the founders of Kaiser Permanente.
Kaiser Permanente was a pioneer in the field of HMOs, or health maintenance organizations. These were healthcare networks that provided all the healthcare for its members for a fixed annual fee. Kaiser Permanente started after World War II as a healthcare program for shipyard and steel workers. And the way it would work is they would prepay for medical care that might be related to their hazardous job, but also non-job related health problems.
I never heard of it before. He started telling me what it was about and how it worked. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's a really good idea. And always kind of kept that with me. When I got to Nashville, I tried to sell the company that I eventually worked for, Hospital Affiliates, on the idea they were a hospital company. They wanted no part of that idea, but they liked me and hired me. And then I guess it was probably about 3 years later, I left and tried to make that thing work on my own and build up my first substantial company.
So let's talk about that first company. It might not have ever happened without a gentle ultimatum from his wife, Andrea.
Finally, she sat me down. She said, I know you want to do this, and I'm fine either way, but, I'm working, we've got a decent income from what I'm doing and so on. If you want to do it, please quit your job, go ahead, jump in and do it. If you don't, that's fine, but I don't want to hear about it again.
His boss at the time wasn't so supportive.
He was just absolutely beside himself, furious about it, which really hurt me. And about a year later, we reconnected and forgave each other for it. But that was the thing that really hurt about it. It hurt him that I would do that.
Phil Bredesen certainly had the idea.
I just came up with this idea of a way to approach the HMO business.
And no doubt he had the drive. But money was another matter.
And went to the people in town actually who'd been the founders of hospital affiliates. Just gotten to know them, from making a board presentation now and then, and being around. So I went to see Dick Eskind and told him about the idea, and really with the idea of saying, can you help me connect with some people who might have some venture capital or something like that I could do this? And he said, well, I'll do that, but why don't you come talk to the four of us first? And so they put together a deal where they would give me, if I would contribute $10,000 in equity, they would each contribute $10,000 in equity. I'd have $50,000 in equity, and they would guarantee a $250,000 bank loan. So that was our startup capital. And so I went out, and I will tell you, there's nothing that will focus your mind quite as quickly as you've got this money in the bank, and you got to pay your American Express bill, and the clock is running, and I'm pretty sure there's no more money, and you've got a wife and a 6-month-old child back at home. You better make this work.
When we come back, how that initial investment in Health America paid off, and how others see the genius of Phil Bredesen.
That first money we talked about, that $250,000 loan and $50,000, we were $100 million in revenue before we ran through all that money.
Support for this episode comes from Haas Goodwin Wealth.
I think, especially with entrepreneurs and business owners, they have built their success by shifting when needed. And I think sometimes that skill can be detrimental when it comes to investment management.
Trying to manage your own investments, especially during uncertain times, can be emotionally taxing.
We have to manage in a way that takes that emotion out of it. It's about putting together a plan prior to whatever the next thing coming down the road is.
Reach out to their friendly and helpful team at HawesGoodwin.com. Haas Goodwin Wealth. Make your mark. Together, we'll make sure it lasts. Additional support for this episode comes from UTXO Management. You've probably heard of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, but did you know this?
There's over 5,000 digital assets or quote-unquote cryptocurrencies out there. There are less than 20 that make any sense for anybody to add capital into.
That's Coin Mateer, and he's the managing director of UTXO Management, and they're located right here in Nashville.
UTXO is an asset management business focused on implementing Bitcoin strategies for accredited investors. We can keep them away from the 4,800 and make selections within the 20, the primary one being Bitcoin.
If you're looking to make investments into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, feel free to reach out to them. If you're not quite ready to make that investment, they would still love to hear from you.
We love educating anyone and everybody that wants to talk about Bitcoin as well. So you can email ir@utxo.management.
So, Health America was up and running, but there were still some acrobatics involved in getting the idea to work.
There were a lot of nonprofit HMOs in the country that had been started. It was a Nixon-era federal program where you could get some federal grants and loans to start up an HMO. A lot of these HMOs got started and were pretty successful, and the people who were running them were very nice people. They were people who were trying to do good in healthcare, but had no idea about how to run a rapidly growing business or market it or so on. So a lot of them were really struggling and troubled or going bankrupt. So my idea was to go in and see if you couldn't acquire these HMOs very, very inexpensively and so on, and then turn them around and make them work. What I found was you couldn't acquire them because the federal government would not let a for-profit company owe it money through these loans. It had to be a nonprofit. So I came up with the idea of having a management contract with an option to purchase. So we'd manage them, and then we have an option to purchase. Put together several of them that way, took that company public to raise capital for it, and then used that capital to pay off those loans and buy them in. So it was a real bootstrap operation.
When it sold in 1986, Health America had 6,000 employees and traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And remember those 4 people who believed from the beginning?
Each of the $10,000 investments became about $40 million. One of the things that I think really hurts entrepreneurship is all of the money that is wandering around in venture capital these days. And you just have this, too often, this generation of young people who think, the point of a business plan is to raise money, and then what you're supposed to do over the next 2 years is get yourself in a position to get the next round or something like that, which is a totally different experience than I've described from Health America, which is I've got this much money, and once it's gone, it is gone, and you're out of business, and you need to figure out how to make it work. When Health America was sold, I was 44 years old. I certainly had enough independence to not work again and for a salary if I didn't want to. And I also thought that, I was in the prime of life, that I had a lot of good experience and a good education. And I figured the next 30 years of my life was probably the most productive I would have. And I didn't want to just reprise the same thing over and over again, go start healthcare company number 2 and number 3 and run them and so on. So I really thought about doing something I'd always kind of wanted to do when I was in college, which is to run for public office.
Why should people vote for Phil Bredesen for mayor of Nashville?
I started a business literally in the den of my house and grew it to a company which was bigger than metropolitan government in Nashville is today. I'd also say that this city has been so good to Andrea and I. We arrived here, her with a job, me without a job, in her Volkswagen, and over the years we've prospered in the city and been able to grow and raise a family, and it's a wonderful place. And I think in city government I have a chance to pay back some of the things that Nashville's done for me.
I ran for mayor in 1987 and lost. Then actually I ran for Congress and lost that.
That's right. Not 1, but 2 losses after what were then expensive campaigns. That self-made success story didn't sell as well as he had expected.
Business people who get into politics have a very mixed record. And I think part of it is that if you go into it saying, well, I'm out of the business world and I know how everything works, and I'm going to just show all these people, how we do it in the real world, you just end up getting killed. And I just look at it and say, well, politics, it isn't better than business, it isn't worse than business, it's just different. And if you're going to play in a different game, you just need to learn a different set of rules and a different set of plays. I remember being very frustrated in that campaign over the fact that every time the newspaper would write an article, they would always start out with, and then multimillionaire businessman Phil Bredesen said. And I get so mad at it, and I'd say, like, when you write about Johnny Cash, you don't say, and now multimillionaire singer Johnny Cash, whatever. That's the adjective they have for you. You need to earn a different one. I don't know how many losses it would have taken me to finally give up, but it would be a lot more than 2. And in 1991, I was successful at it, and spent the next 8 years as mayor.
Ben, his son, was just a baby when he was mayor, and he said, "I want this to be a place that my son. It's great for him to want to go off to Harvard or Princeton or wherever he wants to go. I want it to be a city that he will want to move back to."
Janet Miller was the Chief Economic Development Director for the Chamber of Commerce.
So So he just, over his 8 years as mayor, he just knocked out project after project, cleaned up Lower Broadway, the arena, the Titans. Bredesen knew that the city needed certain, he called them civic furniture, I think is what he called them, certain things. If we really wanted to evolve this city into a true Class A, world-class city, he knew there were certain things that we needed.
I remember the first day in the mayor's office. I remember standing around in that office and the paneling and all the stuff and the police officer standing around and thinking, oh my gosh, should I really be here? And what'll happen if the real mayor comes in? Well, it took me a little bit of time to kind of own the job. I knew one of the things that I wanted to do was to get downtown moving again. If you remember what downtown was like in 1991, I mean, there was nothing going on. If you went down to Lower Broad on the weekend, it was something you didn't tell your parents or your wife about. You're just not the sort of place. And so I really just started trying to think like I did in the business world about, okay, what are the possibilities for this?
Yet, even while facing a blank canvas for opportunity and accomplishment, he wasn't about to sacrifice a healthy home life.
I went to his secretary at one point and told her that we just absolutely had to have some time on Monday afternoon.
Listen in to Byron Trauger, an attorney and political strategist who's become a lifelong Bredesen friend.
I think we were headed to a debate that night or something, or his schedule's blocked off in the afternoon, and I got to have that time. Cancel whatever it is. She looked at me and she said, "Well, I'm not telling him that. You can tell him that if you want to, because you know what that is." I said, "No, I don't know what that is, but it isn't important enough. As important as getting ready for this debate." And she said, "No, that is Cub Scouts." And he's scheduled to make, I think it was to make popsicle stick bridges with the Cub Scouts. And she said, you're welcome to tell him that he needs to cancel that, but if I were you, I wouldn't do that. And I never mentioned it to her.
If you're mayor of the city, you can be somewhere 7 nights a week. I mean, easy to do. And I was pretty adamant about being home at supper time. And on the weekends, I told people once it gets late afternoon on Saturday, I don't care if the president and the Pope come to Nashville together, you are not going to see me till Monday morning. I just, I grew up in a home that did not have a father in it, and I was darn well going to make sure that my son had somebody there when he needed him, not, scheduled once every 6 weeks or something. And it made people mad for about the first 6 months. But after a while, they got used to it, and what I found is they wanted me to give a speech. And fine, we'd, do it at lunch or keep them down to a reasonable level. And I really think it's possible to combine a demanding job with still having a lot of family time if you work on it and are willing to just insist on
it. He'd sit down at the beginning of the year, thought about what needed to happen in the year, what he was hoping to accomplish in the year, and then asked himself, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things that only I can do in order to accomplish these goals? And he wrote them down, and he put them in his wallet, and he would try to keep focused on that and to carve out time to address those 1, 2, or 3 things that only the CEO or only the mayor or only the governor could do.
Racking up a civic resume in Nashville, Bredesen was persuaded to run for governor of Tennessee in 1994.
Not the most brilliant decision I've ever made. The biggest problem I had was in the rural areas, obviously, where somebody's there had never been the mayor of a big city. There had never been any mayor, I think, as governor up to that time. And that frustrated me because that's where I was from.
Do the Titans have a miracle left in them?
By the time he'd run again, he'd had another rather huge feather in his cap.
I really thought the way you had downtown start working again was you needed a couple of anchors, of things that would bring people down, and then all the rest of that stuff would happen. There'd be restaurants and shops and so on if you got people down there. At the time that we built the arena, it was very difficult to convince the council or people to do it downtown. They were happy to have an arena, but they wanted it at the intersection of Interstate something and Interstate something. We got that going and got it built successfully. Went out and worked at trying to find some teams that might come in there, and basketball was what I thought it would be. We worked at that. We're eventually successful in getting an expansion hockey team to come into town. Bud Adams originally called. I had already had the experience of a large number of teams calling who had no intention of coming there. They just wanted to tell their own home cities that they were talking to Nashville to try to get a better deal. So that's kind of the way I interpreted the call, and was a little hesitant. And finally, we sent some people to meet with their people actually up in Chicago. Bud Adams, over the years, embellished that reluctance, and then he told stories about, he called me up and said, "Hey, Phil, how'd you like an NFL team?" And I said, "Go away," and hung the phone up, and those kinds of things. But I started out a little skeptical. If we were not able to get a basketball or a hockey team, were we really going to get an NFL team? Then Bud came to town and we met, and you could not find two more different people. And we actually hit it off over the subject of Western art, and got talking about various things. And he said, I'm interested in, will you pursue this? And the way I protected myself was I said, I'll do that if you'll sign an agreement that while we're trying to work it out, you won't negotiate with anybody else, including the city of Houston. He said, I'll do that.
Check. He throws it across the field to Dyson.
He's got something.
30,
He's got
40,
something.
50.
He's got it.
40.
He's got it.
20. 10.
He's got it.
End zone. Touchdown Titans. There are no flags on the field. It's a miracle. Tennessee has pulled a miracle.
3 years later, he was in the governor's office, and this self-described problem solver had plenty to handle.
Things were kind of upside down. It was after 9/11. The budget was a complete disaster. Unlike when I came into the mayor's office, where I wasn't quite sure if I was supposed to be there or not, the nice thing was I remember standing in the governor's conference room that first day, and I felt absolutely right at home. I mean, I just this is where I need to be, and kind of hit the ground running in that. So the experience of having been, in a job like mayor for 8 years of that really was, very helpful in terms of letting you be effective as governor. I liked both jobs. I liked governor probably more just because the job had more scope to it.
He's the guy that never panics. He is measured. He is steady. We need to work the problem. What do we need to do first? Then what do we need to do?
This is Byron Smith. He's a local investor and board member of one of Bredesen's latest initiatives, solar power.
There's a phrase that people have used a lot over the last 20 years, but, there's the signal and the noise, right? And how do you separate the signal, what you need to be focusing on, from the noise? And the noise gets really loud when things are really good, and it gets really loud when it's really bad. Bredesen's always able to find the signal.
How are you able to continue to find that signal in all the things that you've done?
Well, there are certainly times when I've gotten lost. Let's be realistic about it and lost that signal. But I frankly think that I think back on my training and it being in the hard sciences and so on. I think one of the things that teaches you is when you problem solve, how do you get rid of the extraneous and kind of zero in on asking the right question and how you do it. So I actually think in a way that the focus that he's describing, part of it's just personality, of course, but part of it is just I love solving problems. I mean, it's why I got involved in physics, I guess, and mathematics and so on in the first place. I'd gotten interested in solar when I was governor because I saw it as a way of bringing jobs to the state. I didn't know that much about it as an industry. And it was one that I could get agreement amongst liberals and conservatives on. I mean, what I would say to people is, I don't care if you believe in global warming or not. Some people do, and there's going to be jobs created by people who are trying to address this. Let's have them in Tennessee. There's something here. I don't know just what it is yet.
What it has become is Silicon Ranch, a business venture started in 2011 with Matt Kisber and Reagan Farr, two longtime state government associates.
We went pretty slow for the first couple of years, but then it started to take off. The two of them did a fabulous job managing the company and growing it up. The company today it's doing very well. It's got a blue chip roster of customers that are keeping doing it. I mean, Facebooks and Amazons and some big utilities and so on. Shell Oil bought a 43, I believe it was, % interest in the company back a couple of years ago, and that hasn't made a lot of difference so far in terms of the financing of the company, but it was a huge good housekeeping seal of approval for the company. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to continue to develop it. We have a huge backlog right now. There's a lot of challenges, particularly in this COVID era, of making sure we execute properly on those. But the team's doing a great job, and I think the company's got a very bright future.
Do you think you've got this entrepreneurial gene, you say? Do you think it's going to just keep going?
No, I mean, I'm going to keep doing things I enjoy. I really believe if you've found work that you enjoy, there's not something where when the day you turn 65, you're supposed to stop doing that, find something else to do. I mean, I enjoy being an entrepreneur. As I've gotten older, I have certainly spent more time fishing than I might have, when I was 45 and trying to, run a big company. One of the questions they always ask you is, what are you most proud of? And I remember when I was first asked that question, they expected an answer of, the Titans or the Predators or the new library or something like that. I remember thinking about it at the time, and I said, I think the thing I'm most proud of is that Nashville just expects a lot more of itself and of its government than it did in 1991. It expects and demands more. Do Tennesseans just expect more of their state and expect more of their state government than they did when I came in? The ideal life for me, I think, is to have your family, to have something to do, but also to the third leg of that stool is, be of benefit to the community that you're a part of. And in some say, in a way, it's Nashville, in a way, it's Tennessee, in a way, it's the United States. But trying to also be one of those people who, leaves the things they touch a little better for their having passed by. I mean, I guess it's always been my goal, and I hope that. I hope that Nashville will come to regard my time as mayor as a time in which I left the city a little better because I passed through, and same with the state, and that would be for me the ultimate reward.
Thanks so much for listening to our very first episode of Circle Back. Don't miss an episode. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter at ec.co/circleback. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the word out. This episode is brought to you by Haas Goodwin Wealth and UTXO Management. Circle Back is also made possible by the generous support of the Beth and Randy Chase family. A big thanks to our podcast production team. Our creator and executive producer is Greg Allen. All scripting and writing done by Demetria Kaladimos, and production support from Gaines Allen. I'm your host, Clark Buckner, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Circle Back. To close us out, Maya Isaac with Watch Me.
Ain't nobody here to tell me how am I to climb this mountain. Oh, stay right beside me. Watch me climb, watch me climb, watch me. Ain't nobody here to guide me. How am I to cross this river? Oh, stay right beside me. Watch me cross, watch me cross, watch me. Just watch me climb. Don't take off your eyes while I run down. Just watch me climb. Don't take off your eyes while I run down. Ain't nobody here to teach me. How am I to reach up high? Oh, stay right beside me. Watch me fly. Watch me. Just watch me climb. Don't take off your eyes while I run down. Just watch me climb. Don't take off your eyes while I run down. Run down 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 while I run. Ain't no secrets here to tell me. How am I to reach the stars now? Oh, are you still beside me? Just watch me.